Officer Parker's jaw clenches as he rests a hand on his holstered gun. He towers over an elderly man, slumped on a park bench, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to the old man's worn cardigan. The afternoon sun washes over the quiet park, but tension crackles in the air. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification," he orders, voice firm. The old man lifts his gaze slowly, his eyes tired yet defiant. For a moment he says nothing, simply studying the young officer's face. The silence hangs heavy. Officer Parker's impatience flares. He taps a foot. Finally, the old man reaches into his jacket with shaky fingers. Parker tenses, thumb flicking the safety strap off his holster, ready for anything. But instead of a weapon, the old man pulls out a creased leather wallet. He flips it open with care. A small golden badge inside catches a beam of sunlight. Parker's breath catches in his throat, his eyes widening at the sight. In that split second, the confident officer freezes, heart pounding as he realizes this encounter is not at all what he expected. Earlier that morning, the same old man stood in a hushed cemetery at sunrise. He knelt down on one knee, a bouquet of white lilies trembling in his hand. Before him lay a small headstone, its inscription partially covered by fallen leaves. With a careworn sigh, he brushed them aside to reveal a child's name etched in the cold stone. Deep lines crossed the old man's face as he placed the lilies gently against the headstone. Each movement was tender, deliberate, a silent conversation with a memory. For a long moment he remained there, shoulders heavy. Even now, decades later, the pain of that day had not faded. A single tear escaped down his cheek as he whispered an apology into the wind. "I'm sorry I couldn't do more." The words caught in his throat, dissolving into the morning air. By the time the sun climbed higher, the old man had moved to a nearby park, seeking solace on a worn wooden bench. The city stirred awake around him. Joggers passed by, children's laughter echoed from a distant playground. But the old man sat apart from it all, lost in the shadows of his past. He ran a finger over a tarnished lapel pin on his cardigan, a small American flag, frayed at the edges from years of wear. It was the only outward sign of the life he'd lived long ago. Once he had stood taller, straighter, scanning crowds for threats, ready to lay down his life in a heartbeat. Now those days were ghosts, flickering at the edges of his mind. Officer Matthew Parker was new to this beat, a young cop brimming with pride in his freshly pressed uniform. That morning, he noticed the solitary old man on the bench during his patrol. At first glance, the man seemed merely lost in thought, but something about him drew the officer's attention. Parker had learned to trust his gut, and right now, it nagged at him. Why was this elderly man sitting alone, looking so somber? Parker watched from a distance as the old man occasionally wiped his eyes and clenched his jaw, as if wrestling with deep emotions. A pang of sympathy flickered in the young officer's chest, but it was quickly overtaken by duty. He had a job to do, ensure everything and everyone in the park was safe. The old man's subtle anguish was puzzling, and Officer Parker's curiosity soon hardened into concern. Approaching cautiously, he noticed damp earth staining the old man's knee and a discarded bouquet of lilies in the nearby trash bin. His gaze followed the old man's line of sight to the cemetery, just beyond the park's wrought iron fence. Understanding flickered in Parker's eyes, and his stance softened slightly. "Morning, sir. Everything all right here?" he asked, keeping his tone polite but professional. Startled out of his reverie, the old man blinked and looked up. Up close, Parker could see the man's reddened eyes and the tremor in his hands. "I'm fine," came the terse reply as the old man immediately averted his gaze again. His voice was rough, like gravel underfoot, and carried the unmistakable note of someone who didn't want to be bothered. Parker stood there a moment, uncertain. A soft breeze stirred the trees as an uneasy silence settled between them. The officer's instincts told him there was more to the story. Why would a man come to a park only to sit and quietly weep? Perhaps, Parker thought, He might be ill, or lost, or in some kind of trouble. He decided to probe a little further. "I notice you have an early start today," Parker said, trying to sound casual. "It's not every day we see someone out here at dawn." The old man merely shrugged, offering no response. Parker pursed his lips, the lack of cooperation raising his guardedness. In his short career, he had learned that even the most unassuming person could be hiding something. He noticed a faint stiffness in the old man's posture and a shadow of dirt on his pant leg. Parker's eyes flicked toward the cemetery again. "Were you visiting someone over there?" he ventured gently, nodding toward the headstones visible through the fence. The old man stiffened. His jaw tightened as he slowly stood up from the bench, clearly offended by the prying question. "That's none of your business, officer," he replied gruffly. Parker felt a flash of irritation at the rebuff. Perhaps his approach had been too forward. As the old man moved as if to leave, Parker stepped in front of him, blocking his path. The sudden motion made the old man flinch, a flicker of alarm in his eyes. Parker raised his hands placatingly. "Easy, sir. I'm just looking out for everyone's safety." He kept his voice calm but authoritative. "May I see some identification? Just a formality." His words were polite enough, but the firmness in his tone left no room for negotiation. The old man's shoulders sagged slightly. He had hoped to slip away quietly, but now this young officer, who was probably not even born when the old man's hair turned gray, was demanding his ID like he was a suspect. A surge of defiance stirred within him. He had been courteous enough, and this was turning into an interrogation. "Is that really necessary?" he muttered, face clouding. Parker's spine went a little straighter. "I'm afraid it is, sir." He watched the old man's gnarled hands curl into fists at his sides, the knuckles white with suppressed emotion. The officer's mind raced. A lone, elderly man, emotional in a park, resistant to share ID. It didn't fit the usual pattern of trouble, but procedure was procedure. He reached for his radio, preparing to call in the ID check. At that moment, two worlds were about to collide, the young man's duty and the old man's pain. Sometimes a uniform can't see the human heart beating beneath the surface. If you've ever felt the weight of a story untold, you might sense what was coming. What do you think was hidden behind the old man's eyes? Let us know your thoughts. For a heartbeat, neither man moved. The gold badge glinted in the sunlight, carrying the weight of untold stories. Officer Parker stared, his mouth slightly agape. "Secret Service," he breathed, barely above a whisper. He felt a jolt as he read the lettering and the name engraved beneath. This frail old man had once been an agent, a guardian to presidents. Parker's mind raced, embarrassment flooding him. He had been ready to treat a national hero like a criminal. The old man saw the recognition and hurt in Parker's eyes. With a shaky hand, he closed the wallet and clutched it to his chest almost protectively. "Is this what you wanted to see?" he asked quietly, voice edged with both pride and pain. There was no arrogance in his tone, only a deep sadness. Parker swallowed hard, his face flushing. "Sir, I didn't know," he stammered. He straightened up, removing his hand from his holster and taking a step back to give the man space. For a long moment, Parker simply stood there, struggling to find words. The old man pushed himself up from the bench, standing on unsteady legs. He pocketed the badge carefully. "I served my country for 40 years, he said, each word measured. 5 presidents. I've seen things, done things, that I pray no young man like you ever has to see." His gaze locked onto Parker's, and the young officer felt as if those tired eyes could see straight through him. A flicker of guilt crossed Parker's face. "I'm sorry," he offered softly, reaching up to remove his hat out of respect. "I didn't mean any disrespect, sir. The old man gave a dismissive wave, but something in his hardened expression softened at the apology. He studied the officer anew, noticing the genuine regret in the young man's face, the quiver in his lip. "You were just doing your job," the old man conceded, his voice gentler now. "But next time, try a little kindness first." Parker nodded, shame making it hard to meet the man's eyes. "Yes, sir," he replied quietly. A silence fell between them, filled only by the distant chatter of the park. Parker cleared his throat. Curiosity and remorse battled within him. He knew he should let the man be on his way, but he couldn't shake the questions swirling in his mind. Who exactly was this man? What had he seen in those decades of service that left such sorrow behind his eyes? If I may ask," Parker began carefully, "what brought you out here today, sir? I noticed you were at the cemetery earlier." The old man's eyes clouded, and for a moment, Parker feared he had overstepped again. But then the man took a deep breath, steeling himself. Perhaps it was the earnest respect now in Parker's voice, or the weight of the day pressing on his shoulders, but something in the old man yielded. He motioned for Parker to sit with him on the bench. Surprised, the young officer lowered himself onto the seat, maintaining a respectful distance. The old man stared ahead, eyes unfocused as if watching a scene play out in front of him that only he could see. "You want to know why I come here?" he finally said, voice low. Parker gave a single nod, remaining silent. The old man inhaled slowly. "November 22nd, 1963, he began, the date falling from his lips like a stone. Parker's eyes widened. He knew that date from history class. The old man continued, voice wavering with emotion. "Dallas, Texas, it was a day just like this one, bright, beautiful, until it wasn't." Parker watched the man's trembling hands clench atop his knees. "I was there," the old man said, "in Dealey Plaza. I was just a rookie agent then, assigned to the presidential detail." His gaze dropped to the ground. When the shots rang out, chaos, people screaming, ducking, emotional, the world changed in an instant. His words painted the picture, a motorcade, the echo of gunfire, panic engulfing the crowd. I saw the president's head fall forward," he whispered, voice cracking. Parker felt a chill run through him. He realized this man had been one of those Secret Service agents with President Kennedy when he was assassinated. The old man's eyes brimmed with tears, the decades-old grief as raw as if it were yesterday. "I couldn't reach him in time," he continued, a tear rolling down his cheek. "None of us could, but—" He paused, jaw tight. There was a little boy standing on the sidewalk with his mother, right in the line of fire, maybe 8 years old, just a child. A soft gasp escaped Parker's lips. "I tackled him to the ground," the old man said, voice thick with emotion. "Covered him as the bullets kept coming." His shoulders shook at the memory. "I felt one hit me, here." He touches his side with a wince, recalling the burning pain. "Another whizzed past us. I held that boy so tight, hoping it would be enough." Parker realized he had been holding his breath. The sounds of the park had faded. All he could hear is the ragged breathing of the old man reliving that day. "And the boy?" Parker asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. The old man's face crumpled, and he pressed a hand over his mouth, stifling a sob. "He was alive when I got to him," he managed, voice trembling, scared, crying, but alive. I thought we made it." He fell silent, memories choking off his voice. Parker felt his own eyes sting with tears in empathy. After a painful pause, the old man continued, barely audible. He didn't make it through the night." There it was, the decades-old wound still bleeding in the old man's heart. A stray bullet fragment. They couldn't save him. Parker closed his eyes, a tear now slipping down his cheek as well. The old man let out a shuddering sigh. "His name was Thomas. He loved airplanes and wanted to be an astronaut one day," he whispered. "I learned all that after the fact." He wipes his wet cheeks with a trembling hand. "I visit him every year. Bring lilies. They were his favorite. I promised his mother I'd never forget him." His voice breaks on the last word. Parker feels an overwhelming urge to reach out, but he holds back, letting the man have his space. In the silence that follows, both men stare at the ground. One lost in grief, the other in awe and sorrow. Parker finally whispers, "You saved that boy's life, even if only for a little while. You gave his mother a chance to say goodbye." The old man nods faintly, though his eyes remain downcast, haunted. "It wasn't enough," he replies, a haunted emptiness in his tone. "The president died, that boy died, and me, I just kept going, doing my duty. It never leaves you," he adds, tapping a finger against his temple. The sounds, the faces, the feeling of being too late. Parker blinks back tears. In all his youthful ambition, he had never contemplated this side of the badge, the weight of tragedies carried silently for a lifetime. Wordlessly, he reaches into his pocket and offers the old man a clean handkerchief. The old man hesitates, then accepts it with a nod of thanks, gently dabbing his eyes. Some stories strike straight at the heart, leaving us speechless. In moments like this, many of us reflect on what true courage means. If this story has touched you, share your thoughts with us. Sometimes, talking about it is how we honor people like Thomas and those who quietly carry the past with them. Parker and the old man rose from the bench together. In the young officer's eyes, the old man was no longer a suspect or a stranger. He was a living story of courage and sacrifice. Without a word, Parker extended his hand. The old man looked at it, then up at Parker's earnest face and shook it firmly. In that simple gesture, decades of service and a future of understanding passed between their palms. "Thank you for telling me," Parker said softly. He wasn't sure what else to say. How do you thank someone for a lifetime of sacrifice? He settled on the simplest truth. "And thank you for your service, sir." He gave a slight, respectful nod. The old man managed a faint smile, the first Parker had seen from him. "Take care of yourself, son," the old man replied, voice gentle. "And remember what I said, lead with kindness." The officer found himself standing a little straighter at those words. "I will," he promised quietly. There was a newfound warmth in his chest, a quiet revelation that had forever changed how he viewed his duty. He walked with the old man to the park's gate, side by side. Where once Parker had blocked his path, now he cleared the way, holding the gate open as the gentleman passed through. At the gate, they paused. The city's noises hummed in the distance, life moving on. The old man placed a hand on Parker's shoulder gratefully. "You did all right, officer," he said, a hint of pride in his tired voice. Parker found himself at a loss for words, so he simply gave a respectful nod and lifted his hand in a subtle salute, one serviceman to another. The old man's eyes shone as he straightened up and returned the salute with a shaky hand. They parted with a mutual understanding. Parker watched as the old man walked away, the afternoon sun illuminating his figure. To anyone else, he might have looked like just another elderly man strolling home. But Parker knew better now. He had encountered a hero, not the loud metal-covered kind from the news, but a quiet hero who carried the weight of the world with dignity. As the old man disappeared into the light, Parker took a deep breath and smiled sadly. In his heart, he vowed never to judge a book by its cover again, knowing now that every person, no matter how ordinary they appear, could carry an extraordinary story within them. The sun dipped lower, casting the long shadow of a young man and an old man who had shared a life-changing moment. One shadow, tall and strong, the other bent with age, each forever changed by the other. Officer Parker finally turned and walked back into the park to continue his patrol, but now with a softer step. He felt older and wiser than he had at sunrise. The world around him looked different, somehow brighter and more fragile all at once. Some heroes walk among us in plain sight, their greatest deeds known only to a few. If you believe such stories deserve to be heard, join us. Subscribe and be a part of our journey in honoring the quiet heroes around us. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the people we least expect.